Ch.22 shortened distance, adrift in Sandstorms 3. The scorpion tail. Yet because of the stinger between his fingers, C. Lian was able to grab hold of the tail and capture the snake properly. He squeezed down hard until it became unconscious. Even having been stung, C. Lian's face never changed, and tossed it to the ground indifferently. Everyone be careful, there may be more snakes around. He felt a tight hold on his wrist before he finished his words, and looked to see that it was San Lang who caught hold of him. San Lang. Si Lian looked at the boy, puzzled. The reason he sounded confused was because, at this very moment, the expression on this youth's face was quite off. It was indescribably frosty to the point of frightening. His eyes were focused intently on the wound on the back of Si Lian's hand that had now ballooned thanks to the vicious venom. The small puncture wound had become visibly enlarged, the size of a knife cut, because of the angry swelling. With a dark expression, San Lang wordlessly snatched Ruoye from Si Lian's arm and immediately knotted it firmly on his wrist, preventing the venom from advancing. While Ruoye enjoyed snuggling up to Si Lian, it wasn't all that well behaved, and yet in San Lang's hands it was so compliant it was like it was dead. Ever since they had known each other, Si Lian had never seen San Lang look like this. He opened his mouth to speak, but San Lang turned to pull a dagger off the waist of one of the merchants. Nan Feng saw and knew instantly what San Lang was about to do, and ignited a palm torch. Without sparing a look, San Lang burned the tip of the dagger to disinfect it before turning back to Si Lian and drawing a cross on the mouth of the puncture wound. Just as he was about to lower his head to the hand, Si Lian hurriedly said, "It's okay. The venom is aggressive, sucking it won't do much. I don't want you to get poisoned." San Lang ignored him, tightened his hold on Si Lian's hand, and placed his lips upon it. Si Lian's hand trembled slightly, and he couldn't explain why. Next to him, Fu Yao said in disdain, "I can't believe you went and got yourself pricked. What are you doing, catching the snake when the kid might not even have gotten bit? You're just making trouble needlessly." His words were probably true. Si Lian recalled the airy way San Lang played with the snake in the cave. He probably wouldn't have even cared for any attacks, and wouldn't have gotten bitten. But just in case San Lang didn't notice the snake and got bit, it'd be too late then. Si Lian waved his good hand. "Don't mind it. It's not like it hurts, and I won't die from it." "You're really not in pain?" Fu Yao asked. "Really? I don't feel pain anymore," Si Lian answered truthfully. Since Si Lian possessed the worst of luck, every time he ventured deep into the mountains, 8 times out of 10 he would step onto vipers or run into poisonous insects, and get bitten, stung, jabbed, or poisoned in thousands of ways. Perhaps because of his heavenly status, he couldn't die. At most, he'd run a fever. After 3 days and 3 nights of fevers, he'd be right as rain when he woke, and continue on as if nothing happened. Gradually, he became less and less sensitive to pain, and just lived with it. Right after the words had left his mouth, San Lang finally looked up. The red swelling on the back of Si Lian's hand had gone down, a stain of blood was red on San Lang's lips. His eyes were extremely cold, and he moved his glare to the unconscious snake on the ground. Boom! The snake abruptly exploded into a pool of blood and flesh. The sudden blast surprised everyone, but no one knew who did it. Even if the blood didn't splatter onto anyone, there was still a feeling of unease blanketing everyone. Jian Sheng, who still remembers that Si Lian had also gotten stung, asked worriedly, "Gege, you got pricked too. What will you do?" Si Lian felt the bandage on his wrist and smiled. "Don't worry, little one. We'll still stick to the plan of going to the Banyu ruins and search for the Shanyu fern." Another merchant asked, "You guys are going? What about us? Should we also send someone to go with you? You can all stay here. Banyu territory is dangerous. The more people there, the more mishaps that can happen. We will find the fern and bring it back to you within 24 hours, Si Lian said. For real. Thank you so much. How can we possibly ever?" A number of merchants started stuttering their thanks, but then their faces changed when Si Lian continued to speak. "In order to reach Banyu as soon as possible, I want to borrow your guide temporarily, if that's all right." Naturally, Si Lian meant a Zhao. The merchants went from grateful and relieved to hesitant. Si Lian knew where they were coming from. They were afraid that Si Lian might run off with the guide once he found the Shanyu fern. Even if a Zhao didn't run away, timing would still be delayed. Nevertheless, none of them wanted to venture into that wicked place where at least half go missing. Their worries were entirely understandable, so Si Lian added, "And just in case anything else comes to attack you, Fu Yao will stay until we return." A man for a man. Now there was insurance that Si Lian would come back. The merchants finally agreed and nodded. "All right. As long as a Zhao is willing." Si Lian turned to a Zhao. "Are you open to giving us a hand, my friend? If not, that's okay, too." A Zhao nodded and said, "Yes. But the Banyu ruins are actually not hard to get to, just keep heading in this direction." After bidding the merchants farewell, a Zhao took the lead with Si Lian, San Lang, and Nan Feng following right behind. A while later, Si Lian inquired, "A Zhao, do the scorpion snakes appear frequently in this area?" "Not frequently. This was my first time seeing them too," a Zhao replied. Si Lian nodded and had no more questions. Truthfully, he did live in the Banyu area for a number of years, and this was also his first time seeing a scorpion snake. A Zhao's answer was not out of place. Nan Feng realized Si Lian's intentions and asked in a low voice, "You're suspicious of this a Zhao?" Si Lian responded in a whisper, "Either way, we've brought him out. Just keep an eye on him." In the past, it was usually San Lang who would talk to him first, but since the incident earlier, the boy hadn't looked approachable, walking stoically and silent. Si Lian couldn't figure out what was going on and didn't know how to talk to him, so he kept on walking as well. The four continued to trek through the vast Gobi Desert. The windstorm had long passed, and without any obstructions, they advanced quickly. soon they could see ragged weeds here and there, growing in the cracks of rocks and sand. By the time the sun was setting, Lian finally spotted an ancient fortress on the horizon. The fortress was difficult to see because it was the color of sand, camouflaged in the yellowness and becoming one with the desert. Some parts of the fortress walls were also caved in and buried. As they approached, they found the fortress walls were extremely high, towering over hundreds of feet. It wasn't hard to imagine its vast magnificence, how grand it must have been. Passing through the Barbican, the four formally entered the kingdom of Banyu. Past the gates was a wide and empty city street with dilapidated houses on each side, rotten beams and broken bricks were strewn about. Out of habit, Zhao cautioned the others, "Please be careful and don't leave the group on your own." The other three didn't need that reminder. The actual Banyu fortress was probably different than imagined, and Nanfeng wondered, "This is the kingdom of Banyu. It's smaller than a capital. A desert country is only as big as the oasis it's built on," Lian explained. At its peak, the population was only just about 10,000. It's actually pretty lively in a small fortress like this. Nanfeng continued to observe the surroundings. It would probably only take a few days to siege a country of this size. Lian shook his head, "Not necessarily. Don't underestimate the people of Banyu, Nanfeng. Even if their population wasn't more than 10,000, they kept the number of soldiers at an average of 4,000. There were more males than females, aside from the sick and old, and the farmers, most men joined the army. Besides, most of those soldiers were over 9 feet tall, each more violent than the next. With a mace in hand, they would keep fighting even with swords through their chests. They're very hard to fight." Zhao was surprised and glanced at Lian. "This young master seems to know a lot." Lian maintained his smile and was about to converse some more when Nanfeng posed a question. "What's that wall?" He was indicating a giant mud-yellow building in the far distance. Building wasn't quite the right word to describe it, because it was a giant enclosure formed by 4 massive mud-colored walls without neither doors nor roofs. Each wall was over 100 feet, and on the very top there was a pole, with something tattered attached, flying in the wind. It was a chilling image. Lian turned his head and took a look, then said simply, "That's the Sinner's Pit." By the sound of the name alone, it was obvious it wasn't anything good. Sinner's Pit. Nanfeng frowned. Humming gravely, Lian explained, "You can think of it as a jail. It's made specifically for imprisoning criminals." "How does it imprison if there isn't even a door?" "Throw them in from the top." Nanfeng wondered. Lian was just hesitating in answering when San Lang suddenly spoke up. "They get thrown in. And the pit is full of poisonous snakes and starving beasts." Hearing him finally speak, Lian felt relieved, but when he looked over to San Lang, the boy met his gaze and turned away. Nanfeng swore, "That's no fucking jail!" Exclamation mark. "That's torture. How cruel." Those people of Banyu were either sick in the head or savage psychos. Lian rubbed his forehead. "Not all of them. Some of them were quite endearing." He paused, suddenly, his brows stiffening. "Wait." The other three stopped, and Si Lian pointed upwards. Look at that pull up on the pit. Si Lian rubbed his forehead. Not all of them. Some of them were quite endearing. He paused. Suddenly, his brows stiffening. Wait. The other three stopped, and Si Lian pointed upwards. Look at that pull up on the pit. Is that a person hanging from it? In the dimming light of the setting sun and with such distance, it was difficult to see what exactly was hung on the pole. But going closer and scrutinizing the shape, it became obvious it was a scrawny little person in black, their clothes unkempt, dangling in the wind like a ragdoll. It's a person, San Lang confirmed. When Zhao saw the hanging person, his face paled. This was such a chilling and peculiar display that even a calm individual like him couldn't bear the sight of it. Just then, San Lang tilted his head and said in a low voice, "Someone's here." He wasn't the only one who noticed. Si Lian also heard featherlight footsteps approaching. The four immediately moved to hide in the many decaying houses on the roadside. Si Lian and San Lang entered one house, and Nan Feng and Zhao hid in the one across the street. Soon after, at the end of the broken street, appeared the woman cultivator in white. The woman was dressed in a light white robe, a whisk in her arm, roaming along the street, peering here and their eyes bright and observant, as if she was in her own backyard garden, and not the Banyu ruins. Strolling right after her was another woman clad in black, her hands behind her back. The black-clad woman was beautiful yet cold, her eyes piercing, her raven hair long and free, as if radiating chill from her very person. Although she was walking behind the woman cultivator, no one would have mistaken her as a subordinate. It was the same two women they saw outside the abandoned inn at noontime. At that time, they had passed by too fast, and Si Lian couldn't make out the details of the lady in black. But he now saw clearly that she was indeed a woman. If the one in white was the witch of Banyu, then who was the one in black? The witch swished her whisk leisurely and spoke. Now where did those people go? We were careless for one moment and they all disappeared. Do I have to dig them out and kill them one by one? As Si Lian had thought, they were watched the moment they stepped foot into the fortress. The lady in black approached and stoically said, "You can call your friends to help you kill them." Those friends must have meant the soldiers of Banyu. The Guoshi of Banyu laughed. "Ha! I don't like calling other people. I like calling you. Aren't you glad?" The lady in black ignored her completely and said coolly, "There's nothing agreeable about being called out by the likes of you for something like this. Just go." The Guoshi of Banyu arched her brows but still sped away. Listening to them, it sounded as if they were close. They were no ordinary folks, so the lady in black must have some renown. Someone who would be close to the Guoshi of Banyu. A mysterious fellow cultivator. Or was there a queen or general they didn't know about? Si Lian was trying to connect the dots rapidly in his mind, but held his breath. Now wasn't the time to be discovered. It looked like the Guoshi had an unpredictable personality. If she should find him and excitedly summon her legendary 9-foot-tall, mace-wielding Banyu soldiers, then more time would be wasted fighting them. 24 hours. 1 hour wasted was another hour they'd sink deeper into danger. But there was no helping his bad luck. Whatever he didn't want to happen would always happen. The lady in black was passing the house Si Lian hid in, but stopped mid-step, and her piercing gaze came. Sweeping over the decayed shelter. The Guoxia Banyu was already further ahead, but noticed that her companion had stopped and came back around. Hey, are you not coming? The lady in black didn't look at her. You. Step back. All right, the Guoxi responded obediently and actually retreated. The lady in black was about to raise her hand when suddenly a loud rumble blasted from across the street. Across on the other side, it was the house Nan Feng and a Zhao hid in that collapsed. The crumbling of one house led the entire strip to cave in. Dust and sand rolled into the air and clouded the whole street. Within, a black shadow leapt out, shot a streaming flame towards the Guoxi, but the lady in black rushed forward and blocked the Guoxi from harm. With her left hand still behind her, she flipped her right palm and easily absorbed the flames before rebounding it right back. The black shadow parried with her while escaping and soon disappeared. The Guoxi immediately chased after it, but the lady in black gave the house behind another sweeping look before following after the Guoxi. Bless you, Nan Feng, Si Lian thanked mentally. All of this had happened so quickly, but Nan Feng had no doubt known somehow that they were about to get in trouble and created a diversion to lead enemies astray. He was the only one who leapt out, so Zhao must still be inside the collapsed house. After making sure the Guoxi and the lady in black were indeed gone, Si Lian dragged San Lang out of their hiding spot and called out, Zhao, are you still alive? Are you hurt anywhere? A moment later, a sulky voice came from under the ruins, I'm fine. Si Lian was relieved. Thank goodness. Although Si Lian trusted in Nan Feng's ability to control the crash and would no doubt leave enough space for Zhao to stay safe, it was still more reassuring to see it with his own eyes. He raised one of the rotten beams with one hand, and after a moment Zhao emerged from underneath, covered in dust from head to toe. He patted himself down a bit and returned to his stoic expression. Now there's only 3 of us left, Si Lian said. Nan Feng is creating a diversion, so we must move faster. Do you know where we can find the Shanyu Fern, Zhao? The young man shook his head and said, sorry. I only know where the fortress was, but I've never been here before, so I don't know where the fern can be found. San Lang spoke up. They say the Shanyu fern prefers shade, is small, its roots thin, but its leaves large, like a heart-shaped peach. Why don't you search near a large building? A large building? Si Lian contemplated. If they were talking big, there was no building larger than the palace. In the legend, it was after the festivities that the queen picked a Shanyu leaf, which could mean the fern grew in the palace grounds. The three moved the gaze afar, and in the center of the fortress there was indeed a palace built of brick and wood. From the distance, the palace had a grandiose aura, but upon a closer look, it was not in much better shape than the dilapidated houses on the streets. Through the palace gates was a massive garden. Perhaps in the past it wasn't a garden, but a palace square. With years of neglect, weeds had flourished and spread. Indeed, it wasn't sand beneath their feet, but mud. This was most likely the last sign of an oasis that once was. Shanyu could very well be growing amongst all the other plants. Let's not waste time, Si Lian said. We only have 24 hours, but be careful of the scorpion snakes. Zhao and San Lang both hummed in acknowledgement and lowered their heads to start searching through the plants. As they rummaged, it suddenly occurred to Si Lian that if the Witch of Banyu could control scorpion snakes, there should be an abundance of them slithering about in her territory. Ever since they entered the fortress, they had not seen a single snake. He straightened up and was about to speak when one of his hands felt up a long object. Looking down again, he found that it was a human leg. Next chapter. Ch.23, shortened distance, Adrift in Sandstorms 4. WAAAHHHHHHHH. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Si Lian drew his hand back and was struck speechless. It came to him that every time he saw or touched anything thrilling in the dark, it was always the other party that'd scream first while he remained silent. But shouldn't he be the one who was the most scared? The plants in this garden were tall and thick. It was someone who was already hiding and crawling in the weeds whose legs Si Lian felt. The moment they touched, the leg recoiled and the weeds in front of him bustled. Someone called out, "Don't hit me. Don't hit me. Gege, it's me." Si Lian scrutinized the wild grass and saw that the one emerged crying, "Don't hit me," was the thick-browed, large-eyed Tian Sheng. The boy in turn saw that Si Lian recognized him and sighed a breath of relief. Si Lian, on the other hand, wasn't relieved, rather, he became even more alert, and raised his good arm in a defensive stance. In circumstances like these, it was usually more likely that this was an illusion created by something evil. Weren't you with the others back in the desert? How are you here? Are you really Tian Sheng? Tian Sheng explained hurriedly, "It's me. I'm the real thing. I'm not the only one. 3 other uncles also came. They're just inside. Look if you don't believe me." He pointed towards inside the palace, and sure enough, 3 men came running out, and they were indeed the men from the caravan. When they saw Si Lian, they froze in their steps and looked awkward. Si Lian puffed a breath before finally rising to his feet and dusted off his white sleeves. "What's going on?" The merchants looked at each other and no one made any noise. It was Tian Sheng who spoke up after an awkward silence. "Gege, after you guys left, Uncle Zheng's pain flared and was really miserable. We didn't know how much longer to wait for you to return, and were afraid that you guys might have gotten lost." Zhao Ji said, "To go straight to get to the kingdom of Banyu, so we thought the more hands to help the better, so." So, what he really meant was the merchants regretted letting them go after all. They were afraid that Lian and company would rob them of the guide after finding the Shanyu fern for themselves, so they sent people to come follow after them. Lian imagined that Fu Yao couldn't hold them back, and was probably also too lazy to hold them back. It was impossible to stop stubborn people who refused to listen to reason. Lian felt rather exasperated. You're all too reckless. Who knows what there might be, and what might happen in a fortress like this, and you still came. Jian Sheng himself knew that what they'd done made it obvious they didn't trust Lian and felt bad. So, he didn't make a sound while hiding in the weeds earlier, as awkward as it was. Sorry, this concerned a man's life and we couldn't sit still, so no matter. This was a life or death situation, and to be wary was entirely natural. To go so far into danger for an antidote also proved them to be worthy companions. Lian couldn't berate them for this and sighed. If you didn't bump into anything weird when entering the territory, then it's your good fortune. But how did you know to come to the palace to search for the Shanyu fern? Jian Sheng scratched his head and replied, we didn't know where to start, but in the story the red-clothed Gege told, it was the queen who picked the leaves, right? The queen couldn't possibly leave the palace grounds, so I thought we'd come and try our luck. Well, this kid's mind could certainly spin, and it spun right on target, Lian thought. Just then, San Lang spoke up from the side, I found it. Lian turned to see San Lang striding with his lithe long legs towards him. In his hands were a few turquoise leaves, still with roots attached at the stems. The leaves were about the size of a baby's palm, in the shape of features, slightly pointy at the ends, with roots thin and tiny. Even without a Zhao to confirm, Lian knew without a doubt that it must be the Shanyu fern. Without waiting for Lian to say a word, San Lang grabbed onto his wounded hand and lifted it. The hand that had been pricked was originally frighteningly swollen, but after San Lang had sucked the poison from the wound, the swelling had gone down significantly, despite it not being fully cleaned of the venom. With Lian's wrist in one hand and the Shanyu fern in the other, San Lang closed his palm on the plant, and in a second when he reopened his palm, the fern had been crushed into powder without him appearing to have exerted any force. San Lang gently but firmly rubbed the powder onto Lian's hand, and he could feel coolness and relief stinging on his skin. Thanks, San Lang, Lian said. San Lang didn't respond, however, and after applying the powder, he let go of Lian's hand. Lian couldn't help but think his attitude and this weird atmosphere between the two of them was really peculiar, but didn't know how to ask about it without sounding weird. This wasn't something anyone else would notice either, and they couldn't possibly understand. Gege, are you feeling better? Is the herb working? Jian Sheng asked anxiously. Lian snapped out of it and replied, much better. It should be the right herb. Hearing this, everyone became excited. Hurry. Let's find more. Soon, a Zhao also raised a handful of leaves, crying out, there's more here. The Shanyu leaves in a Zhao's hands were much bigger and fuller than the small, pitiful one San Lang had used earlier, but the shape and marks were all correct, so everyone crowded over and happily exclaimed. There's an entire field here. So many. Pick lots. Let's pick a bunch. Do you think we can sell this? Noisily, the merchants busied themselves picking the herbs. Si Lian turned his head to examine his hand. For a moment, then tried to start a conversation with San Lang. You also searched the same area there in now, right? Didn't you find any at the time? It was obvious Si Lian was trying to force a conversation, and after having asked the question, he felt himself to be rather pathetic. But San Lang shook his head. You shouldn't use the ferns over there. Why? Si Lian was curious. Before San Lang could answer, they heard someone scream. Go away. Everyone stopped their movements, halting. Who said that? Who's screaming? It wasn't me. It wasn't me either. Then they heard that sharp voice again. Go away. You're stepping on me. Only then did the group notice the voice came from near their feet. In a flash, the crowd dispersed from that small field of ferns. Seeing this, Si Lian walked over. He was used to being the one in the lead when it came to these things. He approached the bush where the shrieking had come from and stripped away the thick weeds. Everyone's breathing hitched. Under the weeds, in the mud, was a man's face. In a field such as this, a live human being was buried in the mud with only a face showing on the surface. It was a nightmarish picture, and a couple of merchants held onto each other and screamed. Si Lian comforted them in a skilled and practiced manner. Don't panic. Everyone calm down. It's only a face, nothing extraordinary. We all have faces, no. That face chuckled. Oh, did I scare you? Sigh. I frequently scare myself, too. After reassuring the others, Si Lian half crouched down and examined this face in the mud. It was a man's face, without a doubt, quite flat when he wasn't smiling, but full of wrinkles when he did. Si Lian couldn't tell whether he was old or young, and couldn't say whether he was handsome or not. He couldn't make much out of this face at all, so he simply asked directly, Who are you? The face in the mud asked back, Who are you? Were merchants passing through? Si Lian replied. The mud face breathed alongside. Merchant passers-by. I used to be part of a caravan too, but that was 50, maybe 60 years ago. The situation just became freakier. Was a man buried in the grounds of an old fortress ruin for over 50 to 60 years, still human? One of the merchants shakily asked, in trepidation, then, how did a senior like yourself come here? The mud face cleared his throat and screwed up his expression. I was captured by the Banyu soldiers. I accidentally entered the city. They caught me and buried me here, and made me the fertilizer for their Shanyu ferns. No wonder the herbs in their hands were big and full. They were fed with live humans. The merchants immediately dropped all the plants in their hands, feeling as though they were touching corpses. Si Lian couldn't help but glance at his hand too, but heard San Lang say that one was fine. It dawned on Si Lian. That was why, even though San Lang had looked through this field earlier, he left it to pick a small, almost withered fern from elsewhere. He probably already saw what was in the soil but ignored the face completely. The herb he applied to Si Lian's hand was one he found in an area that was much more remote, but clean of corruption. San Lang was considerate and careful. Thank you truly, Si Lian said. San Lang shook his head, but his face was still gloomy. Ever since Si Lian had gotten stung by the scorpion snake, San Lang had behaved like this. A couple days ago it was all Gege this, Gege that, but now he barely called him Gege anymore. When they first met, San Lang had avoided his touch and seemed wary of contact with Si Lian, but that seemed to have gone away after spending so much time together. Now, besides sucking poison and applying herbs, San Lang was once again avoiding touching him, and it made Si Lian feel unsettled. Just then, the mud face began to speak again. I haven't seen real people in so many years. Can you come closer and let me see you all properly? The merchants all looked at each other, everyone thinking they best not do what he asked. After a while, seeing no one stepped forward, the mud face muttered, What? You don't want to? Sighed, what a shame. Why is it a shame? Si Lian turned and asked. There's something that's been bothering me ever since you all arrived, the mud face said. So I wanted to confirm with my own two eyes. I want to see each and every one of you clearly to make sure. To make sure of what? Si Lian pressed. The mud face replied, there's someone amongst you I've seen before, 50 to 60 years ago. A shiver went down everyone's back and made their hairs stand on end. No mortal in present company should have been aged over 50. That means whoever this person was, they were not human. Si Lian gave a sweeping look across everyone there, from a Zhao to Tian Sheng. Some were in shock, some stricken with fear, some shaking in anxiety, some speechless and confused. Everyone's reaction was normal and within reason. If one must pinpoint the odd one out, it'd be San Lang. But for him, no reaction was probably the normal reaction. Si Lian turned back to the mud face. Who is this person you speak of? The face muscles of that mud face twitched and it gave an exceedingly freaky smile, as if it was using it all to make itself look more reliable, but it couldn't fully conceal the sinister smirk hiding beneath. He beckoned mysteriously. You've come closer, and I'll tell you. Si Lian believed him 80% the first time the mud face asked. The second time Si Lian was less than inclined to continue doing so. Who knows if this monster was only luring them closer before committing some evil deed. There was no way Si Lian would pay attention to the likes of him. Si Lian pushed himself off the ground and was about to walk away before the mud face raised his voice. Do you really not want to know who it is? He will kill all of you.